Many of America's best hackers work for the NSA, and their leader is also in charge of Cyber Command and our cryptology service. And they're all part of the DoD, which is why you hear military terms in relation to cybersecurity. Here's an example. A breach occurs when military personnel force open a locked door. They can do this with a kick, a battering ram, breaching rounds, or a breaching charge. Even the civilian definition of breach involves battering a gap in a barrier, like a castle wall. So if you have the secret code to unlock a door, you're not battering your way through it. When you breach a door, you smash your way in. If you think of a large computer system as having many points of entry, most are protected against attacks. But a hacker may find a weakness and exploit it to breach the system. For the past 25 years, Purdue has kept running totals of vulnerabilities. Most of the top 10 are operating systems with millions of lines of code, so lots of potential weaknesses. CVSS measures the severity of a vulnerability after it's been identified in the wild. But a flaw that's yet to be discovered by the good guys can be the most dangerous, and it's called a zero-day. After spending 7 years interviewing people about the cyber weapons industry, a New York Times reporter wrote this excellent book. Here's how she defined a zero-day. They got their name because, as with patient zero in an epidemic, when a zero-day flaw is discovered, software and hardware companies have had 0 days to come up with a defense. I'll quickly walk through 3 famous system breaches. The book does an excellent job of describing this one. High-profile attacks get an alias from a cybersecurity company like this one that was named by Symantec. When they got their hands on the malicious code, they saw a decorated function name and a reference to a driver file, so they mashed them up to spell Stuxnet. As you'll see in my other examples, not all alias names are so random. Anyway, this attack is famous because it was incredibly difficult to breach the system. A local network is usually connected to the public internet, but Iran's refinery was air-gapped to prevent remote attacks. It was also shielded by 8-foot concrete walls and buried 26 feet underneath the desert. So the CIA targeted 5 local companies that had expertise in industrial automation because their contractors had legit reasons to go on-site and access the facility's internal computer network. Let's see how a worm breached the system. Spies secretly placed infected USB sticks at the 5 companies, like in their parking lots or by their elevators. When one was picked up and plugged in, the worm automatically jumped into the laptop using a zero-day. The worm then spread to other laptops connected to the contractor's internal network. Then, when a contractor visited the refinery and plugged his infected laptop into their network, the worm breached the facility's system. Other zero-days were used to help the worm spread, like a spooler vulnerability in shared printers. Finally, it infected the control system connected to the centrifuges. They usually spun at 1,000 revolutions per second, but the worm forced them to spin at 1,400, which caused their rotors to break apart. After it was discovered, the first zero-day was rated critical because it enabled malware to jump from the USB stick without using the Windows Auto Run feature. Ever wonder why we can't use thumb drives with our business PCs? It's critical enough that when the Pentagon learned that malware was jumping off thumb drives, they sealed their USB ports with superglue. So Stuxnet used an infected USB drive to punch a hole through security. The Cable and Internet division of Comcast had its system breached because of the Citrix bleed vulnerability in NetScaler products. Sometimes an attack is so infamous that it gets its own logo. Before there was Citrix bleed, there was another buffer flaw named Heartbleed. In a buffer overflow attack, excess data bleeds out of the buffer and into other memory, causing an API to return data that shouldn't be accessible. The ironic thing is that a Citrix NetScaler appliance is a load balancer with a built-in firewall to prevent unauthorized access from the internet. Citrix bleed started off as a 0-day, but was quickly patched after it was discovered, and given a critical score of 9.4. However, Comcast failed to install the update in a timely manner and got breached. Ever wonder why we get urgent alerts to immediately update software on our devices? For those who quickly update, we can say that the early bird does not get the worm. So Citrix bleed used a buffer flaw to bust a hole through Comcast security. Russian intelligence breached the system of 18,000 companies and government agencies. One of them was Microsoft, whose president said this was the largest and most sophisticated attack the world has ever seen. The hackers used a supply chain attack by targeting SolarWinds, a company that sells IT monitoring tools. A Trojan horse that would later be given the alias Sunburst was inserted into a SolarWinds update package. When customers like Microsoft ran the regular SolarWinds update process, the malicious file was loaded into their systems, providing Russia a backdoor to steal intellectual property and government secrets. The DLL was even stamped with a digital signature to fool customers into believing it was not altered. So Sunburst used an infected patch to breach the systems of many organizations, including Microsoft. Next, I'll discuss a hypothetical but very common example. Let's say I open a Gmail message and don't realize it's phishing. When I click the malicious link, I'm sent to a fake website that automatically downloads spyware onto my personal laptop. The info stealer sends all my login credentials to a bad guy who uses them on his laptop to access my accounts, like my Google Drive, where I stored many confidential documents that he ends up stealing. When this happens, no newspaper will run a headline like this because Google was not breached. It was my personal laptop that was breached. And this is exactly what happened in the Snowflake incident last year. There were no 0 days exploited, no alias was coined, no logo was drawn. This was a two-pronged event which involved vulnerable laptops and a secure platform. The laptops usually belong to contractors who were hired by companies that use Snowflake. Cybercriminals entered a laptop via a phishing message. When a malicious link was clicked, an info stealer was downloaded, and the goal of these attacks was to steal login credentials. When criminals realized they swiped credentials for a Snowflake account, they simply entered the username and password to walk through the front door. Snowflake was not breached with any kind of malware, and the goal of accessing the accounts was to exfiltrate customer data and hold it for ransom. When the news broke, people were confused by the media's unfortunate use of the term data breach. So what should they have called the incident? Exfiltration is a military operation to secretly withdraw people from a hostile area. Data exfiltration is a malicious operation to secretly withdraw data from a computer. The refinery attack was an example of a breach without exfiltration, and the Snowflake incident was exfiltration without a breach. Google's Mandiant was one of the cybersecurity firms that correctly reported about what really happened. The book describes them like this: Mandiant has carved out a niche for itself responding to cyber attacks, and was now on the speed dial of nearly every CIO in the Fortune 500. In their report, they wrote, Mandiant's investigation has not found any evidence to suggest that unauthorized access to Snowflake customer accounts stemmed from a breach of Snowflake's enterprise environment. Instead, every incident Mandiant responded to was traced back to compromised customer credentials. Mandiant listed 3 factors that described the lax security of compromised customers. They still used the old-fashioned password method to access their account. They did not use multi-factor authentication with their password access, and they did not use a whitelist to allow access from only trusted locations. So a criminal used his own laptop to remotely log into a Snowflake account by using stolen credentials. He signed in with a username and password. And even though the customer chose to enable password logons, they did not force their employees to enroll in MFA. Now that we've looked at customers who were complacent about security, let's look at why vigilant customers were not affected by this incident. Your business laptop contains advanced security features like these, but perhaps the best one is account protection. When your laptop was set up, it was registered with an identity provider. Unlike a password, which is used to validate a user from any device, the Windows Hello credential is tied to a user on a particular device. The identity provider authenticates with 2 factors, a key tied to a specific device and a biometric tied to its user. Authenticating this way gives you single sign-on capabilities. Since you sign in using SSO, there are no username and password to steal. To even attempt to sign in requires your business laptop because it will be connected to your business VPN. If a bad guy goes to your Snowflake login page, he won't even be given a chance to try to sign in. By explicitly defining allowed IP addresses, whitelisting blocks connections from unknown sources. Back to the report. Mandiant identified that the threat actor used Snowflake customer credentials that were exposed via InfoStealer malware. One of the tools listed is Redline, and I'll show just how easy it is to steal credentials with it. Bad guys don't even have to write their own phishing code anymore. They can simply subscribe to this malware as a service. When you click on Redline Stealer, you get a list of its features, which include stealing login credentials. Scrolling down, we can see that it costs only $100 in Bitcoin for a 1-month subscription. When someone clicks on a phishing link, the InfoStealer will send the criminal a bunch of files, including one like this, with all the victim's credentials. Or a criminal can take an easier route and simply buy credentials that somebody else already swiped. Millions of credential files are available, and they even offer customer support. Ever wonder why your security awareness team sends you so many simulated phishing emails? When it comes to cybersecurity, humans are the weakest link.